No, look, I appreciate the kind words and the acknowledgement. It's amazing that was a year ago. It feels like 10 years ago.
It does.
As we were talking before we got on the show, I just made my first trip in over a year. I went out to San Francisco and it was fine, right? I mean, I've had the virus, so I feel pretty invincible, which is probably not a good way to feel. But it was good, and it was nice to be out and meet with people and go to restaurants, and so life is getting back to normal. But what isn't normal, Scott, what is just not normal is the government's just blatant disregard for money. And we talk now in these trillion numbers. And as we talked last time, right, a trillion, right? You and I would have to sit here for 31,710 years, which it'd be pleasant to talk, but after a while it would get old. 31,000 years, and we'd have to spend $1 a second to get to 1 trillion. Now they just threw out 1.9 trillion, although here's the weird thing. I figure there's 360 million people in the country. Let's say half of those are eligible for the stimulus check, because some are too young, some, have too much income. So let's call it half. You do the math, multiply by the stimulus check, you get about 300 billion. Where'd the other 1.6 trillion go? So that's the first thing to worry about is where's all that money going? And now they're talking about 3 more trillion with a T for fiscal stimulus. And you ask if my conviction is still high. Look, my conviction on blockchain technology, on cryptocurrency broadly, on Bitcoin specifically, on DeFi, all of those convictions just keeps getting stronger every day because we keep moving along this technological adoption curve. And the S curve for Bitcoin, we're just at the knee of the curve, right? We've gone from, the innovators to the early adopters to maybe the beginning of the mass adoption. But people want to say, oh, it's the end, or oh, there's this huge correction. I got in a Twitter fight, which I should never do, but I got in a Twitter fight with somebody.
So hard.
Yeah, I should just block, right? I think you and I have talked about this. The best advice I ever got when I came to Twitter was block early and often.
Yep,
just
we have
no time for troll, no time for hate, no time for disrespect. But this guy, he's like, it's going to zero. It's going to zero. I'm going, look, literally. And I put up pictures of his tweets from 2013, 2017, 2020, saying Bitcoin's going to zero. I'm like, at some point, right, you have to acknowledge, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Because look, being wrong, never a problem. I'm wrong all the time. Ask my wife, she'll tell you, okay? Staying wrong is a problem. And the information that we all look at objectively, if we just look at data in terms of adoption, wallets, and blocks and transactions, and just use cases for these technological innovations, just keeps rising. So fundamentally, my conviction is incredibly strong. Now, is this a normal corrective pattern in price? Absolutely, because and you and I talk about this, and you talk about it with your other guests. Look, price is volatile, right? I mean, as John Burbank says best, right? Price is a liar. Value is more stable, but the price rarely reflects the value of anything. It swings like a pendulum from side to side, from extreme to extreme. So, look, to your point, neither one of us, when we talked a year ago, thought we'd be sitting here a year out talking about 50,000 or 60,000 or 40,000 or 30,000. Right. It was a pretty scary time back in April of 2020. And I think we both had conviction that things were going to recover, but I don't know that we had really thought through where in the cyclical bull market we might be. However, if you step back and look at whether it's stock to flow or whether the original parabolic model based on Metcalfe's law, and if you just look at that, we knew we'd be somewhere about halfway through the bull market at this point.
Right.
Probably end up, call it July, August, September of this year with that crescendo. Now, where we go in that crescendo, we'll probably talk about. But that's a long answer to your simple question of how's it going. Oh, come on. I mean, all of that is axiomatically true and sounds really good when you say it that way. But Lord Keynes, right, is a perfect example. He gave a speech, similar speech a week later, and the guy in the front row said, "Lord Keynes, last week you said the exact opposite." He said, "Yeah, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?" And the idea that you won't change your mind, particularly when it's an emotional, not intellectual call, without information, when there's new information presented, just makes no sense to me. And look, I put myself in that same category in that I came into this very skeptical. In fact, everybody I know that I respect came into this world very skeptical because it was, to borrow a good British term, it was rather dodgy, from 2009 to 2013. And it really was just starting to move beyond the cypherpunks and the Silk Roads. And look, I think we might have talked about this last time, but all technology starts on the fringe. And I joke that I've lived my whole life hanging out with the bad guys. And when people say, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, well, if you think about it, I've spent my whole career investing in innovative technology. And innovation always starts at the fringe. First person to have a pager, drug dealers. First person to use the internet, porn. First people to use Bitcoin, drugs. Today, cannabis uses Bitcoin. Why? Because they can't get into the main banking system. And that's what incumbents do. Incumbents create moats through regulation, which they bribe to get, because they actually don't create the regulation. They pay the lobbying, which is just a nice word for corruption. And they create these barriers to entry. And so if you think back to any technological innovation, it's people use it out of necessity. And therefore, in those early days of cryptocurrency and particularly Bitcoin, there weren't a lot of normalized use cases because people didn't understand it. And yet, those who got exposed to it, and I got exposed to it through a good friend, Dan Moorhead, and I think I told you the story, right? I had a chance, right, to invest in his Bitcoin fund or his blockchain infrastructure fund, and I made lots of money investing in infrastructure, whether it was Google, whether it was Yahoo, whether it was eBay, which my board laughed at me. You're going to invest in a garage sale company?